Welcome, one and all, to Tech Tuesday, the best way to start your early to mid work week, bringing you the latest news in tech. Today is April 15th, 2025. Let's dive right into the news of the past week. Starting off with our headline story, Mr. President himself, Donald Trump. As you are all probably very aware by now, a few weeks ago on April 2nd, Trump announced Liberation Day, which came with a slew of tariffs that would be enacted, with a minimum 10% tariff on all countries, and some countries having an even larger tariff, which was calculated based on the trade deficit between that country and the US. And there's already a bunch of videos about how those tariffs were calculated and whether the formula was much simpler than they made it out to be and all that. That's not what this is about. What this is about is the fact that immediately following that news, the entire tech sector was shaken. Some of these things are things we've already covered previously, but I thought that now that things have sort of settled down a little bit more, we could have a more thorough look at everything that's happened over the past few weeks. Just keep in mind that this is not a comprehensive list, but if you think there is something important that I did miss, feel free to let me know in the comments. To start, I will mention that since the initial announcement of the tariffs, Trump has stated that there will be a 90-day pause on the tariffs for all countries except for China, and also that there will be an exemption for the tariffs for certain products. So first announced was exemptions for smartphones, laptops, and computers, and then later on, an exemption for automobiles was also added to the list. However, this exemption is said to only be temporary and only to allow time for companies to transition their supply chains, presumably to the United States. And as you might expect, with all of this news in such a short period of time, the stock market really freaked out. And you can basically see the exact points where the initial tariffs were announced and then where the 90-day pause and the exemptions were announced a little bit later. But amidst all of the chaos, you had companies like Razer, who had paused their sale of laptops after the news of the tariffs came out. But now after the exemptions, I imagine they'll likely start resuming their sales very soon. You also had Apple, who first reacted to the news by airlifting their phones into the US and immediately trying to decide where to relocate their factories to. But then once the tariff pause was announced, they bounced right back immediately and celebrated their best stock day since 1998. With their market cap evaluation increasing by approximately $400 billion, equaling a stock increase of about 15% in one day. As for what will happen after the 90-day pause is up and after the smartphone and computer exemption is lifted, we can't be sure. But Donald Trump did have some advice he wanted to share with Apple in regards to this. Just move your factories to the US! Because in a press briefing from White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, she answered a variety of questions related to the tariffs, and in particular, when asked about whether or not Trump thinks the types of manufacturing required for iPhones could be done in the US, she responded by saying that Trump believes that we have the resources and that Apple has recently decided to invest $500 billion into the US. And surely Apple wouldn't have done that if they didn't think the US was capable, right? Surely the reason why Apple decided to donate all of that money was simply because they believed in the good cause of the United States and no other reason at all. It would never be to, gain any kind of political influence in the government or anything. No, it's just because they believe in the good spirit of the country. But anyhow, you also had Nintendo, which after rumors that the Switch 2 may see a price increase in the US due to the tariffs, had little news to follow. But recently, suppliers have spoken up, saying that the price increase is very possible. Meanwhile, employees at Nintendo have stated that the company already has a stockpile of over 1 million consoles in the US, which could mean that the price increase will just come at a later date after that stockpile has already been sold. Additionally, last week we discussed how Nvidia was potentially facing a ban on exports of their H20 AI chips to China. But it turns out, all it takes is a little schmoozing, and then the government is willing to maybe let up on that ban. Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, attended one of Trump's dinners at his Mar-a-Lago resort, a dinner which reportedly had an admission fee of $1 million. After some discussion and a promise to put more money into US-based AI centers, Trump's team was more willing to drop the upcoming ban. And it seems like Nvidia was very quick to act, because only a few days after the news came out, it was announced that NVIDIA planned to build 2 AI supercomputer manufacturing plants in Texas, with the goal being for production to begin within the next 12 to 15 months. But with all of the chaos that occurred in the tech sector in the US over the past few weeks, I also wanted to take some time to discuss some of the second-order consequences of these tariff announcements, because, of course, the immediate consequences in the US are pretty clear to a lot of us, but there's always more going on, and in this case, it's the country where the tariffs are hitting the hardest, China, that is running into some trouble. Because a lot of businesses in China are beginning to feel very hopeless about the trade situation between the US and China. While big companies can probably handle the hit to their sales and still recover, there are small businesses in China that worry about these tariffs and what they could mean for their livelihood. While Chinese economists feel that in the short term, these tariffs could actually prove to be effective in establishing more of an economic independence between China and the US, they also believe that if the tariffs stick around long term, it could amount to the equivalent of a trade embargo. Any low-value items would become impossible to trade between the two countries, meaning both companies in the US that sell to China and vice versa would be forced to sell their goods in other places. Additionally, in an article I found, a Chinese exporter named Zhou Guoqing expressed that unless Trump and Xi Jinping communicate and come to some better agreement than these tariffs, he feels like he would have no choice but to give up trade with the US altogether. Then, of course, you have the thousands of businesses who sell their products through Amazon. With the tariffs now up to 125% on Chinese goods, representatives for these sellers stated that the only viable options were to either raise prices or simply exit the American market entirely. And let's not forget about Temu and Shein, because the new regulations will have an incredibly large impact on these companies as well. This is because, along with the tariffs against China, there will also be an end to the de minimis exemption for trade with the US. And if you don't know what that is, it is an exemption that allows for packages below a certain value to be shipped between the countries without having to incur any additional fees. Previously, this exemption applied to packages that were valued under $800, but now the plan is to remove the exemption entirely by May 1st. This exemption was the main system that both Temu and Shein were somewhat exploiting in order to sell their goods at such a low price. So with the end of the exemption coming up, these companies' entire models are on the edge of collapse, at least as far as the US user base is concerned. So clearly, tensions are heating up in both the US and China related to these tariffs, but also the situation is changing very rapidly. It's entirely possible that tomorrow some agreement is made and a large portion of these tariffs are lifted. Who knows? But in the meantime, I will keep you all up to date as more news comes out, and we will see what happens in the following weeks. Next up, a lawsuit between Elon Musk and OpenAI has been heating up, as Elon raises concerns that OpenAI's most recent plans intend to steer the company in the opposite direction of its original mission. But in order to talk about this, we first have to discuss the history of OpenAI as a whole. Elon Musk actually co-founded OpenAI alongside Sam Altman all the way back in 2015. They structured the company as a nonprofit because Musk felt that the company should answer to humanity, not to shareholders. Then in 2019, Musk stepped away from OpenAI as Sam Altman took the helm, launching a for-profit subsidiary of OpenAI, which allowed the company to raise billions of dollars. And while the company has been able to do a lot since then, let's not forget that they also have faced a lot of controversy in the past few years. In 2023, OpenAI's board tried but failed to oust Sam Altman as their CEO. Remember that? And after that, many of the top executives and engineers in the company left due to safety concerns. In the second half of last year, Elon Musk sued OpenAI for failing to stay true to their nonprofit mission, calling it a, quote, textbook tale of altruism versus greed. Then, earlier this year, Elon Musk offered approximately $100 billion to buy OpenAI, which led to Sam Altman subtweeting Elon Musk, jokingly offering $10 billion for Twitter, which is less than a quarter of what Elon says the company is worth. And as you can imagine, Elon was not too happy about that. All of this culminated to a moment in this past week when OpenAI announced that they were countersuing Elon Musk, saying his actions were in bad faith only trying to slow the company down and to seize control for his own benefit. Additionally, around this time, plans were announced to eventually transition control of the company entirely to the for-profit subsidiary, with the nonprofit branch just holding some stake in the company, completely getting rid of the nonprofit mission and transitioning to for-profit. The actual trial itself is not set to begin until the spring of next year, but already some ex-employees of OpenAI are siding with Elon Musk, saying that stripping the nonprofit of its control would fundamentally violate the company's mission, that the nonprofit structure was critical to the company's strategy, and that many of the employees for the company joined because they believed in its nonprofit mission. But like I said, the trial isn't set to begin for about another year, so we will just have to wait and see how the story unfolds from this point. Personally, I hope that they stick with the nonprofit direction, but I also doubt that Sam Altman will want to do that willingly at this point. In another bit of quick news, we have another trial. A trial which was announced late last year between the FTC and Meta, but which has just begun as of yesterday. The FTC accused Meta of being an illegal monopoly after it bought WhatsApp and Instagram. The goal of the trial is to get Meta to divest from both of those companies. The trial is expected to take a couple of weeks before it reaches any sort of conclusion, but there already are some interesting developments, including Mark Zuckerberg admitting that one of the reasons he wanted to buy Instagram was the fact that its built-in camera features were better than what the company was able to make for Facebook up to that point. This was already feeding into the allegations of Meta using, quote, buy or bury strategies in order to succeed. And then on top of that, you had emails that surfaced where Zuckerberg had said that he had to buy Instagram since it was growing much faster than Facebook, and that buying isn't the same as killing, and that it is better to buy than it is to compete. But again, this is another thing where the story has just started. Not too much is out yet, but as always, I will be sure to cover more news about the trial as more information comes out. Up next is a word of warning to all of the vibe coders out there. Actually, it's two words of warning. First up, Microsoft released a new study from their R&D division that shows that all of the current popular AI models, including Claude 3.7 Sonnet and ChatGPT 1.0, still fail to debug many issues in a software development benchmark. The study found that even when equipped with a suite of debugging tools to assist the AI models, even the best performing models were still unable to correctly solve more than half of the SWE Bench Lite problems. So while AI might be able to help you program some simple tech demos for your portfolio, you can't yet expect it to be able to assist you when it comes to industry scale coding and debugging. Second, and perhaps more worrying, part of the reason why these AIs fail to resolve bugs in code may be related to a new type of cybercrime known as slop squatting. You heard that right, slop squatting. You truly cannot make this up, and yet somebody did. Recently, it has been reported that AI models can have a tendency to hallucinate certain software packages that do not exist. However, it seems that these hallucinations are not random, but rather seem to be repeated when similar prompts are provided to the AI model. And the fear here is that people with malicious intent will create a package containing malware that is named after one of these common AI hallucinations, and then when people use the AI model to try and solve a problem with their code, the model will suggest the package, and the user will install it to their system unaware of its malicious capabilities. But luckily, there's no confirmed cases yet of this occurring, but given how more and more people are becoming reliant on AI to solve coding problems, I feel like it's only a matter of time before this begins to happen. Lastly, to close out, we have our research highlight for the week, which in this case is just something fun that I happened to stumble upon. User DistroHopper39B on GitHub created NTATV, a project that allows for Windows XP to be installed on the original Apple TV. For those unaware, before Apple TV Plus, Apple's streaming service, Apple released the Apple TV, a product that you could plug into your TV to access different streaming services and media platforms such as Amazon Prime and YouTube. And you can think of Apple TV as Apple's competitor to the Amazon Fire Stick or something like a Roku. And so this GitHub project allows you to install Windows XP on the Apple TV. Is it practical? No. Are there a bunch of features that still don't work and probably never will? Absolutely. But gosh dang it, this guy saw a random YouTube video and then spent 2 years trying to get this to work. And that is the kind of dedication to a random, meaningless project that I have nothing but the utmost respect for. Just a computer engineering problem for the sake of solving it. And this guy tackled it, got it mostly working, and then released it to the public for anyone to try out. And I think that is pretty cool. Anyhow, that brings us to the end of Tech Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching, and tune in next week to learn what happens next in the world of tech. See you next time.